Some of the files were real, thousands of them weren't. The policyholders listed didn't exist, the addresses were fictional, the medical histories had been invented. And the premiums had been paid by the company itself, to keep the fiction alive. The fraud that one man had tried to expose for months, the fraud that regulators had laughed off as impossible, was real. And it was $2 billion deep. This is part 2 of the equity funding story. What happened when it collapsed, who went to prison, and the one regulatory failure that let it run for nearly a decade. When the Illinois regulators made their findings public, the reaction on Wall Street was immediate and violent. Equity funding stock had already been sliding on the back of the whispers Ray Dirks had set in motion. Now it collapsed entirely. Trading was halted. The SEC launched a full investigation, and as regulators began pulling at threads, the full scale of what Goldblum had built became visible for the first time. 64,000 fictitious policies, $2 billion in fraudulent assets, a parallel record-keeping system that had been running inside the company for years, and a circle of employees, eventually identified as over 100 people, who had known some or all of what was happening. The number of insiders was one of the most shocking elements. This wasn't a fraud run by one man in a back office. It was institutional. Employees had been recruited into it gradually, first asked to do something small, then something larger, then something they couldn't walk back from without exposing themselves. Here's what made prosecution so complicated, and why it took longer than it should have. Many of the insiders had participated under pressure. Some had been told that the fraud was temporary, that once the company's real performance caught up with its stated numbers, everything would be unwound and nobody would ever know. Some had been threatened. Some had simply been told that this was how the business worked and hadn't questioned it. Sorting out who was a perpetrator and who was a victim inside the same organization took investigators months. Stanley Goldblum resigned immediately when the investigation became public. He and several other senior executives were indicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and securities violations. The case that prosecutors built was complex, not because the fraud itself was sophisticated, but because the paper trail ran through so many people across so many years. And then there was the auditor problem. Equity funding's outside auditors had signed off on the company's financials for years without detecting the fraud. How? The answer is both simple and damning. The fake policies were housed in systems the auditors didn't access. The employees who managed the fraud knew when audit periods were coming and prepared accordingly. And the auditors, operating on sampling methods rather than full reviews, never pulled enough files to hit the fictitious ones at a rate that would have triggered alarm. It was a structural gap, and equity funding had been specifically designed to exploit it. The audit firm faced significant scrutiny after the collapse. New auditing standards were subsequently developed in direct response to the equity funding case. Standards specifically designed to require auditors to independently verify the existence of assets rather than simply accepting company records at face value. The fraud literally changed how auditing works. Stanley Goldblum pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Several co-conspirators received shorter sentences. The reinsurance companies that had purchased the fictitious policies recovered some losses through litigation, but absorbed significant damage. Equity funding was liquidated. And Ray Dirks, the analyst who had believed the whistleblower and told his clients to sell, was charged by the SEC with insider trading. The case went to the Supreme Court, which ultimately ruled in his favor. But the legal battle took a decade and effectively ended his career. The man who helped expose a $2 billion fraud was prosecuted for exposing it. What makes equity funding worth studying isn't just the scale, it's the architecture. Goldblum didn't build a simple lie. He built a system. Parallel records, isolated departments, controlled audit access, a reinsurance monetization mechanism that turned fake policies into real cash. Every element was designed to be self-sustaining and self-concealing, and it worked for nearly a decade. Not because regulators were corrupt, not because auditors were negligent in an obvious way, but because the fraud had been engineered to fit exactly inside the gaps of how oversight actually operated. That's the lesson. Fraud doesn't hide in the shadows. It hides in the architecture, in the systems, in the gap between what auditors sample and what actually exists. Equity funding didn't fail because someone got greedy and sloppy. It failed because one man decided the truth was worth telling, even when nobody wanted to hear it. If you want the full case study breakdown with red flag checklist, everything that should have caught this fraud years earlier, it's linked in the description. And if this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. New corporate collapse every week.